Hello, I'm Maha. Welcome to my channel, Maha's Musings, where today I'm going to be doing a book review on The Universe is Expanding and So Am I by Carolyn Mackler. Now, when I saw this book cover, I was thrilled because it's so beautiful and gorgeous. But I wasn't sure whether I wanted to read it because it didn't seem like the kind of book that I usually pick up and read or spend time reading. But I've been recently reading a number of books back to back, and some of them have been pretty heavy reads. And this one just spoke to me, just pulled at me, and I decided to get it. And I'm so happy I did because it gave me so much joy. Let me start off with a quote from the book, one of my favorite quotes from this story. Sure enough, Mrs. Myers fastens her milky eyes on me, shifts her gaze over to Froggy, and then veers back to me. Be careful not to let yourself go, Annie, she warbles. Men like their bank accounts big, not their women. When I read this line, I just laughed aloud. It just came out of nowhere. And it was just like a tension reliever, And I was just like, wow, I have to mention this line somewhere when I do my book review. Now, Mrs. Myers is this elderly, catty old woman, who lives in New York on the Upper West Side. And whenever she meets Virginia, the protagonist, at the lift, she always has a word or two to say to her. Unwelcome words, but they are just so non-PC and leaves Virginia squirming. And in this case, she's saying it in front of her then boyfriend, Froggy. So these unwelcome remarks are just like totally uncomfortable for Virginia, naturally. But Mrs. Myers has no plans of stopping. So what's this story about? Well, it basically revolves around a 16-year-old girl called Virginia, who lives in New York on the Upper West Side. She's from a wealthy Jewish family, and she goes to a very prestigious private school, a co-educational school. And she's living her life, with her friends and wanting to break up with her boyfriend. But then there's also another side to this story, a dark side. And there's this disconcerting truth that comes up within her family that they all have to deal with. Now, she comes from one of those wealthy families which owns a country house in Connecticut, a huge apartment in New York. And they have this oh so perfect image about them, trying to keep up with the Joneses, especially the mother, who's very image conscious. Then she has a father. She has dad issues because the father's constantly ogling at younger women. Then there's the brother, Byron, who's a jock and studies at Columbia and who's put up on a pedestal, by the parents. Then there's a sister, an older sister by 8 years. So she doesn't really have a competition or rivalry with the sister, but she's also gorgeous and is doing humanitarian work in Burkina Faso in Africa. So what's Virginia doing with her life? She feels a little less accomplished than them and not as beautiful, So this is a story about her and how she comes into her own and how she learns to stand up for herself and an uncomfortable truth presents itself. She's no longer going to be the punching bag for her family. No, especially when she's got a budding romance going on in her life. So, what are the pros to this story? Oh yeah, there are quite a few pros. The first is the beautiful book cover, and it's, got a whole composition of colors, just like Virginia herself. She's got green and purple hair. It helps her to stand out and makes her feel as if she's an individual who is coming into her own, because she's always feeling as if she's fat and not attractive. She's been fat shamed for most of her life by the mean girls at school, and also been made to feel less than beautiful and valuable by her parents subconsciously, and also looking at her siblings. But then she realizes that this is not how it is. Her brother's no longer going to be the cool guy anymore in her eyes after something is revealed. And this is what her friend has to say, Virginia's friend, Alyssa. This is Byron's problem, and Byron will have to deal with it. You have to keep living your life. So, what is the problem? You have to read the book to see what the problem is. I also liked the themes to this book, aside from the beautiful cover. The themes have to do with coming into your own, feeling comfortable in your own skin. It has to do with friendships, your support system, and also about your identity, and being true to yourself. That's a very important theme. And how to get over certain aspects like fat shaming, which happens not just in your teenage years, it can happen at any time in one's life as well. And how she sort of rises to the occasion to learn how to stand up for herself. So I would think that the cover, the title of the book, The Universe is Expanding and So Am I, also has to do with Virginia's expanding worldview and how she's coming into her own and how she's learning to stand up for herself and live in the present and do things that make her happy despite the problems that exist. She's learning to focus on the now and the happiness of things, and that's very important, naturally. I also like how New York plays a central role in the story. I've been to New York many times, but I've never lived there. I lived in Washington, D.C., but there's a familiar aspect to the story, and I also like how it presents itself as a space for not just fun and activities, but as a gateway for endless possibilities for the youth, in terms of not just education, but in terms of finding a niche for yourself, finding something there that'll connect with you. And this quote I really liked from the story. I was thinking a different neighborhood. My brain flashes to the High Line. That's a 1.5 mile long park that runs along the west side of downtown Manhattan. I've seen couples holding hands, and it always seems so romantic. I really like the sense of vibrancy that New York brings to the story. It's just a very different vibe to Sex and the City, where it's all about glam and a little unrealistic, but as much fun as this story. This story has a much more realness to it, It revolves around teenagers, but the themes are very real and very relatable, like the character Virginia. Even though Virginia is somebody who I did find a little annoying, she tends to, spill her heart out. She has no filters at one level. But she's also real, and she's also somebody who's struggling to find her place and fight for her happiness. And I found that really relatable and endearing, I also liked some tidbits in the story that had to do with certain interesting facts, you can say, that would be a great conversation starter, like when she starts working at this high-end private gym in Manhattan. And this is what the manager tells her. We figure that for every 25 people who walk through the door, 2 will walk out with a towel. So these are high-end quality plush towels, and even wealthy members want to have freebies even though they're not on offer. This shows you something about, the human psyche and psychology. So, what are the cons to this book? Well, there were no real cons as such, other than I thought, the budding romance between Virginia and Sebastian had some entanglements in it. So I don't think that, the reaction to a certain truth or problem that arises was very realistic. They seemed a little nonplussed about it, and that's okay. I mean, this is a fiction story, but I think the reaction from them was a little naive, I would say, and also, I guess, heartening at one level too. Sebastian seems a little unrealistic, a little naive. He blurts out something to Virginia about his sister, which could compromise her. She's going through a case in the courts, but again, he's an 18-year-old guy. He's not that young, but he seems a little naive and bit unreal, I would say. Too good to be true. He's a really good looking guy who's not a jerk. So I would give this book a solid 4.5 stars. Yes, for the pure joy it brought me. And I'm really grateful for that. It's a book series, a short book series, and I'm going to read the other book as well. After reading this one, I really liked the author's writing style, the dialogues within the story. Although it's not going to perhaps, win a literary prize, but for the sheer joy it brought me and the element of surprise, 4.5 stars for sure. Thank you so much for joining me today in my book review. If you have any comments or suggestions, I'd love to hear from you. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel, please do so. I love hearing from you, and it's very encouraging. I'm also on Instagram where I write my book reviews. I'm also on Goodreads as well. So thanks again for joining me. Until next time, have a good weekend. Bye for now.